It's a new year and there are a lot of new cameras out there, which can be a bit overwhelming as a beginner to try to sort through all those options. But I've tested a lot of cameras for video, so I'm going to help you narrow that choice down by giving you my suggestions for the best cameras for beginner filmmakers in 2025. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the camera is just a tool in the filmmaking process, and going out and buying the most expensive one you can find is not going to automatically make your videos look good. It's learning how things like lens choice, lighting, and framing, just to name a few, are used with that camera to tell a good story that's then going to make your videos stand out. But before we even get to the camera recommendations, there are three things to keep in mind, which are the sensor size, the resolution, and the frame rate. And I've made in-depth videos on all three of these topics that are linked in the description to help you better understand them. However, if you're already familiar with what all of those are, then you can skip ahead to this timestamp here to see those camera recommendations. But for a quick overview, the sensor size is going to determine how well your camera does in lower lighting conditions, and also what field of view your lens sees. Your resolution is going to determine whether your footage is HD at 720, Full HD at 1080, or 4K, which is 4 times Full HD. And then there is the frame rate, which is normally 24 frames per second in video, and with 60 frames per second or higher, you have the ability to slow your footage down for slow motion. Also, each of these cameras has an external microphone input, which is very important because audio is vital when it comes to making good videos, so you don't want to rely on your onboard camera mic. Even though they are getting better, they still just don't compare to having a quality shotgun mic on your camera. And I have links in the description for the best prices I could find on Amazon or B&H for all the cameras I'm covering, which costs you nothing but will greatly help out the channel if you decide to buy through them. And for the camera recommendations, we have the Canon R10 for $979 and the Sony ZV-E10m2 for $998. And before you go writing in the comments, those are way too expensive to be beginner cameras, let me point out that beginner does not necessarily mean cheap. Filmmaking is not a cheap hobby to get into, and these cameras are actually quite inexpensive compared to professional video gear. However, if they are too expensive for you right now, I wouldn't suggest just going and getting something cheaper, because you can still learn things like lighting and framing and get good at it with the camera that you probably have on you all the time. But anyways, both cameras have an APS-C size sensor, which crops the lens focal length by 1.6 on the R10 and 1.5 on the ZV-E10m2. They both also have an articulating touchscreen, giving you the ability to use touch autofocus and see yourself when recording, which is great for vlogging or making YouTube videos like this. The ZV-E10 does not have a viewfinder, so you'll have to use the articulating touchscreen for photos, whereas the R10 does have an EVF, or electronic viewfinder, giving you the option to use that for photo or video. I typically use the rear touchscreen for taking photos anyway, so for me it doesn't really matter, but if an EVF is something that you like, be sure to take that into account. Both cameras can shoot 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second with no extra cropping of the image. They can also shoot 60 frames per second in 4K, which allows you to get smooth slow motion. However, the Canon R10 has an additional 1.8 times crop on the image, making the footage look way more zoomed in, versus the Sony ZV-E10m2 that only has an additional 1.1 times crop at 60 frames per second when in 4K. Both cameras also give you the option to shoot 422 10-bit video, but the ZV-E10m2 has the ability to shoot a higher bitrate intra-frame recording mode, whereas the R10 is limited to a group of pictures type of compression. I know that probably sounds a bit technical and confusing, but don't worry, I have other videos explaining how various types of compression affect your video quality, as well as more videos showing the effects of bit depth and color sampling on your video quality and your color grading capabilities in editing. The ZV-E10m2 doesn't have a recording limit when shooting 4K, but the R10 does have a 2-hour limit in the normal 4K mode. However, that'll likely still last you until either the camera battery dies or you run out of space on your SD card. And even though both cameras are nearly the same price, the Sony ZV-E10 has more video features such as picture profiles like S-Log3 that allow you even more control over the video quality and options for post-production as you learn more about improving your videos. There are also more native and third-party lens options for the Sony ZV-E10m2 as compared to the R10 with its relatively new RF mount that has a more limited and expensive range of lenses if you don't want to use adapters. Speaking of lenses, I have videos on lens suggestions for both of these cameras that will help you get the most out of either camera when it comes to the video features you'll want to have. Both of these are great beginner cameras for under $1,000, so let me know down in the comments which one you're more interested in, or if you just have any questions about either camera. Now, if you do have a larger budget to spend starting out in filmmaking, I would highly suggest you invest that money in getting a quality lens rather than going out and getting a more expensive camera that has more video features. I have another video showing a comparison between a cheap camera with an expensive lens versus an expensive camera with a cheap lens. And you'll find that the lens makes way more of a difference on image quality than the camera, especially when you learn how to use good lighting for your shots. New cameras come out every year with new video features, so getting a really cheap lens because you spent $2,000 to $3,000 on an expensive camera that's going to be outdated next year won't do you nearly as good as buying a cheaper camera with a $1,000 to $2,000 lens that you'll be able to continue using with every camera upgrade in the future, so long as you continue buying cameras with the same lens mount. And after spending time with both these cameras, I do prefer the Sony ZV-E10m2, what a mouthful, over the Canon R10 because of the more video features that it does offer. But again, remember that the camera is just a tool in the filmmaking process, and it's the skills you learn and how to use that tool to tell a good story that's gonna make your videos stand out. And I have a lot of other videos linked in the description to help you with learning to use your new camera to tell a better story. So regardless of what camera you choose, just be sure to practice with it every day so you can learn how to shape those shots and make them flow to tell a better story. But if this video was helpful, please help me out by hitting that like button. Subscribe if you're new because there's a lot more content on the channel to help you in your own filmmaking journey, and I'll see you soon.